Yeah, so if you're online, by the way, I just want to say, can you send us a little email and tell us how things are going, how you're enjoying that experience? But I'm also thankful that all of you got here and got here safe. We're really thankful that you took the time and you took the opportunity to do that. That's really wonderful. And yeah, it's December 1st. Can you believe it? Wow. Okay. I'm going to take you back. Let me take you back to a time in history when kings ruled nations. And if you know anything about those moments in history when kings ruled nations, entire nations really rose and fell. And the people who lived in those nations really rose and fell on the whims of a king or queen. Whatever they decided, whatever they, decreed for their nation and for their people, often, governed the fortunes of those people under their rule. And for many of us here this morning, we've never been in a situation where tens of thousands of people have kind of been affected by a decision we make. Okay? We've never had that kind of authority. We've never had that kind of ability to govern the world in such a way. But the reality is, our decisions are real. Israel in the north and Judah in the south. Ahaz was the king of Judah in the south. And he had gotten word that a couple of other nations were conspiring to war against him. And he was trying to prepare the nation for this onslaught of this military coup that was coming from Syria, by the way, and in Israel in the north. And he had to make a decision about how he was going to protect the nation. And this man approached him, and the man that we know today as the prophet Isaiah. And the prophet Isaiah approached the king that day, and he said to King Ahaz, "The Lord has said not to worry about this warring faction that is coming and going to attack Judah, that God himself is going to protect you. And the nation of Judah is going to be safe. And the decision you have to make is the decision between fear and faith." So, to even sweeten the deal, Isaiah said, guess what? You can ask God for anything you want. A sign of any kind. If you ask God for anything, he will give you that sign. You just have to tell him. And God will give you that sign to validate the very fact that he says that nothing is going to harm Judah. And if you respond in faith, then God will protect the nation. Ahaz at the time, even though he was given literally a blank check from God, I don't know about you, but you're going to make that kind of a decision, I'll tell you what, the Lord himself is going to give you a sign. And the sign is the sign of Emmanuel, which in Hebrew is God with us. And basically what Isaiah was saying is this generation is on hold. And the next generation, God is going to begin to do this amazing work. And it's going to come through the work of a child. It's going to be a baby, born of a virgin. That baby is going to be known as Emmanuel, as God with us. And he's going to have characteristics that you cannot imagine. And it's going to change the world. And in that moment, when Isaiah had given Ahaz a choice between fear and faith, Ahaz chose fear. And literally allowed a blank check signed by God to go uncashed. And here we are beginning in chapters 7 and onward in Isaiah is this unfolding, beautiful prophetic picture of this baby, of this Emmanuel, of the characteristics of this child and unfolding into the suffering servant, the messianic hope, and all the beautiful things that we celebrate this time of year. I just want to read you, because in the next few weeks, we're going to look at one particular verse over and over in Isaiah. And this is Isaiah 9:6. For a child is born to us, Isaiah prophesied. A son is given to us, and the government will be on his shoulders. And he will be called Wonderful Counselor, Mighty God, Everlasting Father, Prince of Peace. Now, many of you, if you celebrated Christmas in any kind of a Christian way, you've read this verse time and time again. But we're going to look at the very first characteristic of Wonderful Counselor of this passage. Notice that the passage says that the government will be on his shoulders, right? That whoever this child is going to be interesting about all of these characteristics. They all have a divine element to them, and they all have a human element to them. You would never at the birth of a baby give these characteristics to a child unless you knew it to be divine. You would not give these characteristics to a baby, even born of a king, that they demonstrate characteristics that are beyond human capacity. And they're beautiful in the sense of what they portray for this baby. We have wisdom and power. Most kings, if you study history, are looking to convey wisdom and power. You don't want a king who is helpless and stupid, right? Right? Okay, let's make sure we're on the right page here. Okay? You had me really worried there for a minute. Oh, we don't want government that is helpless and stupid. Okay? Okay, all right. Okay. We don't always get what we want. Okay? What can I say? Yes, that was live streamed. Thank you. But I'm in so much trouble. Okay. Are we ready to go? Yeah? Yeah. What we want from anyone ruling over us is wisdom and power to some degree. And hold those tightly together. To have power without wisdom is what? Okay? To have wisdom without power is what? Okay? The two together are an incredible combination. And that's what this passage tells us the child is going to have. Be a wonderful counselor. There's a story in the Old Testament of the birth of Samson. And wonder in the Old Testament is always related to signs or miracles or amazing things that God does. That word wonderful, we sort of look at that word and we go, okay, that's a nice description, whatever. But biblically, it's loaded with all kinds of associations to God. That you can't read that kind of like in the Hebrew mindset and just see that as a nice descriptor of the type of counselor that Jesus is going to be. The fact that it's wonderful is a sign of the divine element and essence of who this baby is going to be. There's a story about the birth of Samson, and Manoah is the father. And an angel appears to his wife and starts saying that you're going to conceive this. You would have the wisdom of God. It's a powerful combination to have that two words associated together. When you pray, you want an answer that is both wise and powerful, don't you? You want to be able, when you're asking God for wisdom, you are expressing that God is the ultimate authority when it comes to matters of wisdom and power. Isaiah, in a number of places, talks about the wisdom of God. And I love what Isaiah does. One of the things that Isaiah does about the characteristic of God that almost no other prophet really touches in any kind of a powerful way, but he talks about God as unique, that there's no one that can compare to God, that no matter what, God is by himself alone. Okay? When it comes to this wonderful counselor, when it comes to this, Isaiah writes in Isaiah 40 about God. Who else has held the oceans in his hand? Who has measured off the heavens with his fingers? And who else knows the weight of the earth? Or has weighed the mountains and hills on a scale? And this is what he says. He goes, who is able to advise the Spirit of the Lord? Who knows enough to give him advice or even to teach him? Has the Lord ever needed anyone's advice? Does he need instructions about what is good? Or did someone teach him what is right or show him the path of justice? Isaiah was very clear that God needed no one to give him advice or to teach him anything, because God is all-powerful, all-knowing, all-seeing, all-wise. And then when the baby that is being depicted here has all the characteristics of God. You know, it's a very simple message this morning, okay? That there are times in our lives where we're like Ahaz. And it might not be, a decision of a king protecting his country from, warring factions that are coming. It could be very simple decisions in your life. But just like Ahaz, we come to places in our lives where we are faced with making a decision that's either generated by fear or generated by faith. And we need something in the midst of that decision to kind of pull us in a way that is right. And for many of us, there are times where we've allowed fear to make more of the decision than our faith. And to know that when we pray and when we depend on Jesus, that he is a wonderful counselor, that he's not going to lead us astray, that he's not going to take us down a road that is not going to be healthy for us. That we can depend by faith in God working things out. Two of the hardest things in life to accept when it comes to faith in God is that God is good and all he does is goodness. There are not two more difficult concepts of God to embrace. But I don't know about you. There are times in my life where I could have easily fallen into the path of fear, because that was the easy decision to make, isn't it? Because it feels like the protected position, right? If I don't step out, if I don't do this, nothing's going to happen, no harm's going to happen, or whatever. The reality is, if you don't step out, you just never know. And many of us live with the regrets of never stepping out and losing out on what God has for us because we've been afraid to step out in faith. There are decisions that you're trying to make right now, and you need someone who's a wise counselor. Have you ever thought about asking God, asking Jesus to answer that question for you? There are so many times in the Gospels that we have the people, especially after the Sermon on the Mount, where people were amazed at the teaching of Jesus because he didn't sound like the Pharisees. What he was saying to people was absolutely transformative. And if you had said to them in that crowd at that time, he is the wonderful counselor, they would have absolutely said, yeah, we can hear it. We can see it. What guides your life? How do you make decisions that are important? Do you rely on fear and trepidation? Or do you take a moment to pray and say, God, lead me through this? Because I know you are the wonderful counselor. I may not have the entire, road mapped up in front of me, but I know that when I lean into faith, that I can depend on you to walk me through it. It's a very simple message. And yet one that time and time again as a pastor I see unfold all the time. That much of what we do is generated more by fear than it is by faith. Why not just trust God and see where that takes you? And this Christmas season, why don't we step out in faith a little more? Can we do that?